Hello, welcome back to Bebop Review. My name's Andy Shaw. Today we're going to be talking about secondary dominance. So I've written out all the chords in key here, so obviously you should know all these by now. So we're in the key of C, even though I haven't put a key signature in. So we're in the key of C, so this is chord 1, which is C, a C major trad obviously. Then you've got D minor trad, and then the E minor on chord 3, F major on 4, a 7th chord, which would be G7 on the chord 5. Then you've got 6th chord at A minor and B diminished on chord 7. And I hope you remember that each one of these chords has a function. Chord 1, 3 and 6 are tonic function. Chord 2 and 4 are subdominant, and chord 5 and 7 are dominant function. Never forget function when you're thinking about chords. Okay, right. Each one of these chords can be preceded by a dominant chord called a secondary dominant, right? They can also be preceded by something called a substitute dominant or an alt chord as well. But we're talking about secondary dominants. Now, secondary dominants are different to substitute dominant, and it's mainly because the root movement is different. The root movement of a secondary dominant is exactly the same as a dominant chord, right? That is the 5 going to 1 in any key. Right, so just let me write this down. So we've got G7, right? And that is going to C. Now that movement is called 5 going to 1, isn't it? And it is indicated in analysis by a solid line arrow going like that. Do not forget that either, that the analysis of a 5 going to a 1 is a solid line arrow, okay? I don't know if I've told you this before, but I'm telling you now, don't ever forget that. Right, so that's 5, 1. So, what is so special about 5 going to 1? Well, for a start, the root movement of this G going to this C is very strong. Somebody on one of my videos were complaining about harmony and saying, why do we write the recital of fifths and things like that when the root movement actually goes down in fourths, right? So G is actually going down to C, G, A, B, C. That's a fourth, isn't it? The guy's kind of really correct what he said. Somebody actually made another comment and said this guy was an idiot, basically, saying you don't know what you're talking about and all that. But I actually understand what he's talking about. So I just want to make this clear that the root movement of G7 to C is kind of like, even though we say it drops down, so we're dropping down a fifth, it's kind of like the movement is a fourth, you know, G, A, B, C, you know what I mean? So you can see it that way if you want. Now, the reason why we don't see it like that is basically tradition. The recital of fifth type of thing and everything we see in music dates before harmony was even invented, and so we just keep it going. We keep the tradition going. Now, I can give you an analogy of that in engineering. When you talk about electricity, we always say that positive is live going to negative, but actually electrons go the other way, from negative to positive. But tradition has had it, you know, for years and years and years, to written down positive to negative, and you can actually see it like that. It still works. So by tradition we keep that going when we're talking about electricity. So it's the same thing really in music. It's just been going on for years that we talk about perfect fifth movement, mainly from the way music was first invented by the Greeks, you know, harmony, although other nations actually did kind of invented this as well. You know, the Chinese for a start actually invented, I think the Chinese were the very first people who actually came out with perfect fifths and understand music like that. But we in Europe talk about the Greeks, you know, we talk about people like Pythagoras, you know, and people like that. So it's basically tradition. I thought I'd just mention that even though it looks like things go in fourths, we always say fifths because of tradition. Okay. So the movement of this chord sequence is going from 5 to 1, right? Now that is called a perfect cadence in England. I'm not sure what the Americans call it. I think it's called Yeah, I think it's called a perfect cadence as well, something similar. Anyway, it's called a perfect cadence. Now, secondary chords follow that root movement, 5 to 1. So if you had a preceding chord before this seventh, this G7, which was a dominant chord, it would have to be a perfect fifth above. So if we look at the root of this seventh chord down here and we go up a perfect fifth, we see the D, don't we? So the chord preceding that would be D7, right? Let me just write that down for you. So you could get a D7 preceding that. Again, solid line, because we're indicating this perfect fifth root movement, right? Now that is the secondary dominant of that chord. So this chord is the 5/7 of 5, because this is the fifth chord, okay? It's a 5/7 of 5. Now you can put root movements before all these chords, and I'm going to go through just to make sure you've got this absolutely right. I'm going to go through each one, and a lot of you are going to find this boring, but you might actually find it interesting, because I've noticed that some people talk about secondary dominants on YouTube really don't understand them. They think they do, but they don't, right? So I'm just going to clean this up, and then I'll start from the D, the chord, because I've showed you what this C is. The secondary dominant on that is obviously not the secondary dominant, it's called the primary dominant, which is this G7 that leads to C. So let's have a look at what leads to D, okay? Okay, so let's have a look at this D minor chord and see what's happening here. I'm going to do this in figures because it's just easier for me than writing out the whole chords. So I'm going to write it up here so you can look at the chords yourself if you want. So you've got a D minor chord, right? Or it could be a D minor 7. And the perfect fifth above that D is that A, isn't it? So it's A7. And the perfect fifth to there. Now, let's have a look at this chord just for a second. Right, this is A7 going to this D. So the movement is definitely a perfect fifth, because a perfect fifth above that perfect fifth above that D on there is an A, isn't it? Okay? So it's definitely right that it's that chord now, if I can just write it down, is called the 5/7 of 2, and it's usually written like that. 5/7 at the top and 2 at the bottom. So it's a 5/7 of 2, okay? So what about this chord, E? Let me just scribble it off and I'll just write this one next to it. So you've got this E minor, so what would be preceding that? Well, if you've got E minor, that note there, perfect fifth above, is B, isn't it? So if I write B7, that's going to there. Is that right? Yeah, because that is a perfect fifth above, isn't it? So the secondary, the 5/7 of 3, is E minor. So that's okay. So what about the fourth chord? Let's have a look at that. So I'm looking at this one now. So write F down. So what's the perfect fifth from F? F, A, C. So we'd get C7 going to F. Is that allowed? Yep, because that's a perfect fifth, isn't it? So we've got perfect fifth movement. So the 5/7 of 4 is F, isn't it? Right, so let's go to the next one then, which is G7. Well, G7 we've already said. G7, right? Actually, we haven't said it, sorry. G7, let's write that down, thinking in terms of one, right? So G7, right? So what's the perfect fifth above G7? Well, it's D, isn't it, look? That's a third, that's a fifth. So it's D7. And that would be the 5/7 of 5. And don't forget, you put your arrow in to tell you it's a perfect fifth movement. An unbroken arrow tells you it is a perfect fifth movement, and don't ever forget that. Okay, right, so let's have a look at the sixth now. Sixth chord is A minor. Perfect fifth above. Yes, we've got the E. So it's E7, isn't it? Solid line. Perfect fifth movement. So that is the 5/7 of 6. So the 5/7 of the 6th chord, which is A minor, is E7. Easy, isn't it, this? Yeah? But now look. We've come to the 7th chord. Now this is a bit of a problem, isn't it? Let's just write it down and see what's happening here. So we've got the 7th chord, which is B diminished. I'm going to write diminished actually. So I put it circle for second. D diminished, right? Now this chord could be B diminished. It could be B. If you put the A there, which is in key, it could be the B minor 7 flat 5, or what the Americans call the B half diminished. Or if you put the flat to A flat in and created complete minor thirds all the way up, that would be a B diminished 7. Right, now the chord before that, right, in key is F, right? So looking at that, B, perfect fifth up. Well, we've got F, haven't we? But a perfect fifth above B is not F. It's F sharp. So that is out. You cannot have a secondary dominant that is not perfect fifth movement. And that note F is not a perfect fifth above that B. So a perfect fifth movement doesn't exist. So the chord, 7 chord, in a key, right, in a major key, cannot have a secondary dominant. Now, you might have a chord going to be diminished, but it's certainly not going to be a secondary dominant. So I hope you understand that the chord, the 7th chord in a major key, which in this instant is B diminished, cannot have a secondary dominant before it. Okay, so if you hear people on YouTube, and you do hear it a lot, saying any chord in key can have a secondary dominant before it, it's wrong, isn't it? It's wrong, because a secondary dominant chord must have perfect fifth movement. Okay, so you've got that for now. Okay, so I've written down all the secondary dominants here. I've also just written down the primary dominant, because I just want to show you something. If you look at the primary dominant here, which is this G7, which goes to this C, you'll notice that all the notes of this chord, G7, G, B, D, F, are in the key of C. But when you look down at all the others, A7, B7, all these secondary chords, C7, D7 and E7, they're all chords, all the chords here are non-diatonic. That means that they're not in the key. A7 is actually in the key, it wants to go to D, so it's actually in the key of D, isn't it? Which would be the root of this minor chord, you know, if you made it into major, that. And it would have C sharp in, and you could, if you would have an extension, you'd probably get F sharp or whatever. This one, B7, is obviously in the key of E, so you've got this D sharp, F sharp here, which is the root of this minor chord. C7 obviously F, so you've got the B flat, which is in F. This G7, sorry, this D7, which is in the key of G, so you've got this F sharp, and this E7 is in A, which obviously has a G sharp as well as an F sharp and C sharp, doesn't it? Right, so what I want to show you is this. The fact is that the non-diatonic structures, secondary chords, right, they've all got at least one note that's not in key of what we're in. We're obviously in C, because all these chords are in the C. And they're all expected to resolve down a perfect fifth, and they all have a diatonic root. Notice that the root is diatonic to the key of C. Now there's something else I just want to show you before I leave this video, and that is, if you look at this chord A7 and look at the note that's in it, C sharp, if you add that C sharp to the scale that goes over D minor in that key, that note is actually a bebop scale, forms a bebop scale, because the scale that you see quite a lot has got this C sharp in, so you get D, E, F, G, A, B, C, C sharp, D. It's like the added chromatic note to this D, D minor. I know David Baker said it's F sharp, but I've actually seen the C sharp, and a lot of other people have as well. Now that note is actually related to subdominant sound, really, because you see it over not only that D minor but the F chord as well. Okay, so I just thought I'd show you that. And on the G7 here, the D7 which goes to G, you see that the note that's different is this F sharp, and if you put that on the scale that goes over the G7, which would G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, that's also the bebop added note. If you look at C, we know that the bebop added note is G sharp, but we don't get that. All the notes are in the C because it's primary dominant. All the notes are in C. But another tonic chord, which is this A minor here, does contain the G sharp. So I thought I'd just show you that. It's very interesting. I'm going to be talking about this in the Levin and Wilson, which I really need to get on with. It's going to take some time, and I need to do a bit of research on that as well. But this is one of the things that Charlie Parker seems to understand about the way chords move, that you can actually use these notes in solos, you know, in actual melody lines, which I'll actually be talking about, like I said, in the Levin and Wilson when I get to it. Anyway, we're talking about secondary chords now, so I just thought I'd show you that. So basically that's secondary chords for you. Right, in the next video, I'm not going to do it in this one because I think you've got enough to think about. In the next video we'll be looking at the tensions on secondary dominance. It's a little bit involved, so I need a whole video just to tell you that on its own. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video. Bye.